This week's The Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler and me, Neil Barnett, is looking at the issues of injuries and fitness. We want the best players to be fit whenever we go to games, but so many injuries this season. And we're doing it through the same format as we did the first podcast. We've got Martin's letter from the Gantry, my voice of passion, his voice of reason. We'll have our special topic, and then we're finishing up with three of the best. Let's go.
Aguero!
The joy of football. Hello. This is the second episode of the Joy of Football podcast with Martin Tyler, the voice of football, and me, Neil Barnett. Second episode, which just goes to prove that the first one wasn't too catastrophic, and neither of us have pegged it in the interim. This is basically us just indulging in the greatest addiction in the world. Just a reminder, Martin still commentating these days with Premier League football productions, and me, once the voice of Chelsea, I suppose you could say.
Very much still in many people's minds, Neil, including mine.
And more latterly, the voice on Sirius XM in USA Radio. But we're going to concentrate today on the number of injuries in football at the moment and the amount of football that's being played. And I want to start at the top of the Premier League, Martin, because we've now had a period with both Liverpool and Manchester City without their number one goalkeepers, Alisson and Ederson. And what we've seen is that they've both got outstanding deputy keepers in Kelleher and Ortega. It really has been, it's been just brilliant organisation by these clubs.
Well, Kelleher has been at Liverpool quite a long time. He's an international with the Republic of Ireland, and he's obviously had some big moments in the past, like the Carabao Cup final a couple of years ago.
So rub it in right at the beginning.
And I think it's a happy thing for him, but it also represents that Liverpool have been doing everything right to have somebody around for just this sort of occasion. And there's no doubt Alisson's played a massive part in taking Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool to where we find them today, but no one is indispensable, and that's the absolute root of football, really. And I think we talk about the joy of football, we're talking about the joy of goalkeepers. It's a tough life. I mean, if you can play outfield, you get a game somewhere, you get on for 10 minutes somewhere. But if you're sitting game after game after game on the bench and then suddenly it's down to you, that's a test of character, and Quiveen has done extraordinarily well. Not surprised though, whereas Stefan Ortega came with less of a fanfare and probably was like the cup goalkeeper, and that seemed to be the deal, didn't it? And now he's suddenly shown he's the Premier League goalkeeper, and again, great credit to him and to the getting of the player. I mean, recruitment is so important, and there's so much that is driven by analysis these days. So I suppose in a way you've got no excuses if you don't get the right sort of guy. But to get somebody who will come to a club where he knows probably he's not going to play unless this sort of thing comes up, or just play in the occasional cup game, although you can go a long way as the cup goalkeeper with Manchester City. So, well done to them. But it is a worry. We are going to talk about general level of injuries, but the goalkeepers are getting problems. Sam Johnston now out of the England setup, having been earmarked really as one of the three goalkeepers to go to the Euros in Germany. So when opportunity knocks, you have to be ready, but as a goalkeeper, more ready than anybody else.
Well, I mean, it's only 10 years ago that you didn't have cup goalkeepers. This is a new thing, and it's certainly you wouldn't have them all the way through to the final as Kelleher has done with Liverpool twice against Chelsea. He was brilliant again this season. Funnily enough, I interviewed Stefan Ortega recently and asked him about just this, how what kind of mentality you need. This is what happened. And how is it for you coming in for the cup games with Ederson, obviously the number one choice? Where's your head every day?
First of all in the training session, and then when I get the chance to play on the games. So I'm not
I'm not young. I have a lot of experience now, so I can handle this situation in my head. So it's not easy to switch on because I do it every day. Doesn't matter if it's a training session or a game.
Stefan Ortega talking to me there, and these interviews are brought to you in association with Sirius XM in USA and Canada. Martin, if 10, 20 years ago a goalkeeper had been injured, that would almost be the end of your opportunity to win the league.
I was trying to think when you were talking about when the substitutes came in. Of course, we did get the opportunity to have substitute goalkeepers and in the three, but I don't think you have to have a goalkeeper on the bench in those days. No. And so it was reliant. And of course, goalkeepers had a pretty straightforward, if you can call it that, job. They had to stop shots. They had to keep the goal intact. And now, of course, with the extra footwork and the fact striking the ball both short and long, you have to have proper techniques to be able to do that. And
which Ortega and Kelleher are so good at.
Very good at, and they're obviously not alone. And goalkeepers, as we've mentioned in the past, they have lost their jobs because they can't do that sort of thing. That's the demands of the modern day goalkeeper. Whether that increases the risk of injury, I don't know. What I can tell everyone is no one works harder in training than the goalkeepers. They go off on their own little world with their goalkeeping coach. The outfield players usually take the mickey out of them, but they know what they have to do, and they do it day after day out. Reflex stuff, throwing themselves about, no longer in mud to soften it on these hard grounds. And they are a credit to their profession. They really, the detail and the camaraderie between the goalkeepers as well. I think that's very important for these number twos to know that the number ones are there injured, but supporting them and adding to the network that you need to be able to step up and perform at this level. And yeah, great credit to them. We could all list where it hasn't worked out from time to time.
Well, this is where I want to go now.
Yeah.
Because Kelleher obviously has come up through the youth program and therefore he's known the situation. Ortega knew what he was coming into. But for poor Aaron Ramsdale, he went to Arsenal to be the number one, had a very successful season, and then got dislodged by David Raya and finds himself as the number two. And when he's come in this season, he's not been as good, and he has made mistakes, and it's almost as if it's affected him, which isn't surprising. The whole process. He's been brilliant as a number two goalkeeper, as a person, giving huge support quite publicly to Raya, but he's not always been brilliant when he's come in.
But he hasn't come in through injuries. He's come in when Arsenal played Brentford, and Raya's not eligible to play because he's still on loan. So that puts extra spotlight. And of course, as an England goalkeeper, you've lost your place. Every moment, every breath you take while you're on the pitch when you do get a game is going to be scrutinised forensically, and he's had to deal with that as well. He's got a strong personality. I admire him for not making a fuss. Perhaps he's had assurances from Gareth Southgate that whatever happens, whether he plays or not, that he will be one of the goalkeepers. And clearly with Nick Pope having a lot to do to get back to prove that he could be in contention, and now Sam Johnson out of contention, then, he's probably going to get some reward at the end by going with England. But unless Jordan Pickford gets injured, he's not going to play. But then that's what we're talking about, isn't it? Can you step in and do the job under those circumstances?
Well, I think it's going to be a very important summer for Arsenal, because if they do lose Ramsdale, as everybody expects, they've got to find a number two who will serve them as well as Kelleher has been serving Liverpool and Ortega serving Manchester City. Because City had real problems before with Zach Stefan, who just didn't quite step up to it. And before that as well. So Ortega, they've had a few goes to get Ortega. It'll be interesting to see how long he stays as well, because he'll be in demand now. Right, we've got all the regulars that we had in the first episode coming up, including the letter from the Gantry, Martin's prepared piece,
yes.
Thought through and specifically written. So here it is.
Yeah, it's a letter from the Gantry. And before I start, I want to say all of you have shown some interest in us actually doing podcasts too. Thank you. We'll try and improve as we go along, and maybe you can let us know what you like and what you don't like. This is something that is my own initiative, caused by listening to orators much greater than me talking about subjects wider than football, but using words so well and trying to make a point. So it's scripted, which is unlike commentary, which is totally unscripted. So give me a bit of slack. So I'm going to start by telling you there's a very good website where the 20 Premier League clubs are analysed by their current absentees. It not only names the players and their injuries, but also includes relevant quotes about the status of recovery from within the club, usually from the managers. The length of recovery time, though, is rarely specified. The medics don't like their prognoses going public, understandably perhaps, because such statements can be called into account if those projected deadlines are not met. As I speak, the total number of Premier League players on the treatment table is 126, an average of over 6 per club. Luton have 13 injuries, Newcastle 12, Chelsea and Sheffield United 11. And obviously that's a real burden to their respective priorities at the sharp end of the season. Football does need to find an answer as to why commentators like me are regularly starting their team news by listing many a household name who is not available for the game that they're broadcasting. There are many factors, of course. Despite the wet winter weather, Premier League pitches are usually very hard. The drainage at the top grounds is remarkable. Most would take a monsoon. The positive is that you never get a top-flight game called off for waterlogging, but the hardness of the playing surface is approaching that of artificial pitches. Back, knee, ankle joints suffer from an impact that was never there in muddier times. ACL injuries, very serious knee injuries, are becoming more frequent, it seems. The knee injury that takes months of recovery, Newcastle's Jamal Lascelles, the latest high-profile victim. We wish him well. Secondly, today's players, male and female, are athletes like never before. They're trained for sprinting and durability in a way which must horrify the world of track and field. Usain Bolt doing the 10,000 metres, Paula Radcliffe contesting the 100 metres. I don't think so. Stats are now readily available for the most distance covered and the most sprints. These are demands which don't really complement each other, do they? But data shapes careers like never before. The criterion to break into men's professional football used to be simple. Can he play? Now the physical aspects are a major part in progress up the ladder. Sheer ability without those extras is now not enough. Another point, we're still finding out the longer-term effects of football's first mid-European season World Cup. For those who took part and for those who were consigned to a different kind of winter break, vacational at times or friendly matches with their clubs, there were changes in training regimes that can be very disruptive to the body. And it's only, 16 months ago. An international fitness specialist might take a very different approach to the regular routines of a clubman. Even playing in a different position can have a damaging consequence to muscle memory. Finally, and I guess this is the big thing, the issue of the football calendar, which puts increasing demands on our elite players every month of the year. There is a statutory 3-week break, but it's squeezed in, bare minimum for physical and mental recovery in itself anyway. And sometimes players even skimp on that to ensure they're available for the next game, and the next game, and the next game. And they want to play, and we're proud of them for doing so. But we should cherish our top players, and they are perhaps at the greatest physical risk in the history of football, despite a wonderfully high level of medical support. There are just too many names on one particular team sheet, that of the treatment table website. The fans have no guarantees for their considerable outlay that they will go to a game and see all the stars. For me, action is required.
Couldn't agree more. I think there's one thing that we have to add to this that has changed in the last 10, 12, 15 years, and that is the high press, the intense, non-stop running that goes on. And I just think, I think we see during the season, it was an allegation made against Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool early on, wasn't it? That they were running out of steam at the end of the season, and it used to be said about Pep teams as well.
I think now you can see, they're going to press now, or they've sorted out the way the opposition are trying to play from back. It's worth the press, and it's evaluated during the game rather than an absolute tactic from the start. As long as you can keep running, you can't press for 90 minutes. However superbly drilled and physical specimen you are.
But I think a lot of managers do demand it. So.
I'm not sure. I think they will pick their moments where, this is when we press. That's our trigger. Or maybe the player like Conor Gallagher at Chelsea he is the trigger. He sees the chance from on the field, which is, I think, another way of looking at it as well. Players do have the right to make decisions on the field. That's something I know Neil and I feel strongly about. It can't be so overcoached, the game. But it is part of modern day football. It's a thrilling game of where the turnovers lead to so many chances. And
the turnovers lead to so many chances now because they're mostly 3 yards outside the penalty area, as the ideal of playing out from the back is completely undermined by people who were never that good at kicking a football in the first place. I want to go back to Jack Charlton.
Wow.
Jack Charlton took over the Irish job, the Irish national team job. And I can still remember Andy Townsend, when he was at Chelsea, saying, "It's unbelievable the way we have to play." He said, basically, when the opposition have the ball, you don't muck about. You close down the nearest player. The nearest player to the player with the ball just goes and closes him down. And when it's passed, the nearest player to that player goes and closes him down. There's no, I'll pick up this player, I'll pick up that player. Nearest player, you go, and you just do that all game. It worked as well, because the Irish overperformed in World Cups and European Championships for Jack Charlton.
I was very privileged in the 1982 World Cup to work with Big Jack. A couple of stories.
Did he ever buy you a drink?
Yes.
Oh,
yes.
blimey.
Yeah, I stand up for Jack, but he was quite happy to have drinks bought for him, I must say. But we were doing the England games, and they were mostly in Bilbao, but one of the games in the group was at Valladolid, which is a journey from Bilbao, and we had a local driver who actually went on to become a very important figure in FIFA's behind the scenes, not an executive level, but was always at games. But he was a driver just doing it for the money at the time. But he was a disc jockey. So we were well aware that he worked into the small hours and that he was then driving us not halfway across Spain, but a certain distance, certainly a few 100 kilometers. And anyway, we realized sitting in the back, setting off, that Borja that was his name. He was not fully compos mentis, we say. And Jack stopped the car. He said, "Get out. Go and sit in the back with Martin. I'm going to drive." So Jack drove us from halfway to Valladolid. I don't know whether licenses ever came into question, but he wasn't going to take the risk of this lad falling asleep and us not getting to the game, or worse. And the other thing about in that tournament, where his pronunciation was quaint to say the least, where he called Arconada, the Spain goalkeeper, Anaconda, and Ray Wilkins was Butch Wilkinson. Graham Rix was Brian Rix, who was if you're a bit older, you'll know that was a famous actor in the world of farce in the West End. But he was wonderful, and this is something I haven't really said very often publicly. I should tribute to him. I mean, I was a commentator for 5 or 6 years. I was thrust really beyond where I should be at that point in time, and I'm very grateful that ITV took a chance on me. But I was very, very serious about it, and very frightened of making mistakes and wanting to justify the faith that had been shown in me, but a bit, not exactly a nervous wreck, but a bit neurotic about it. And we'd done a couple of games, and he took me to one side and he said, "Look, son, lighten up, because you could be in this business a long time, and I'm proud to have proved him right, whether I would have been if he hadn't given me this conversation." It was a bit of a dressing down, but it was done with kindness and force. And I went away and, of course, thought about what he said. And I thought, if Big Jack says this, World Cup winner, they were my heroes, the boys of '66. I've written a book about them. They were, if you like, the defining team. So to even be in the company of somebody was very special. And to be put in my place by somebody was very special. I can imagine a few opposing centre forwards got what I got that particular day.
Brilliant bloke.
Great man.
Brilliant.
And proud to talk about him now, because he was so good to me.
I just want to pick up on one thing you said there. Butch Wilkins, Ray Wilkins. Ray Wilkins said to me on a couple of occasions that one of the reasons there are so many ACL ruptures now is that football is controlled so much for people with potential from a young age, and they're not allowed to play. It's all coaching. So they don't, as he did, play for his school on a Saturday morning, play for his dad's pub team on a Saturday afternoon, play on his Sunday morning team, and he'd play 3 games every weekend minimum, and sometimes 4.
Well,
and he said kids used to build up muscles in a way that they never build up their muscles now.
It's a bit of an old-fashioned idea, but you know, I believe in it because I was one of those kids, not in Ray Wilkins' class, but I went to university, played for the university team on the Saturday, got a few bob playing in a Sunday league game on the Sunday morning, and then played in an interdepartmental competition in the afternoon, weekend after weekend. And you know, I've got nothing. I'm not carrying around any scars or injuries because of that. But we did have more of an outdoor life, and life has changed. And there are so many good things about the way young footballers from a very tender age are coached into the. You know, we're seeing a fantastic generation of talent, as opposed to durability, if you like. Maybe the kind of players that we look back on and say, well, that was the old English game, and that the foreigners used to call English kick and rush, didn't they, and all that. Maybe they were products more of this. Let's just play. And I remember thinking, and I've never been a golfer. But somebody told me once, said the Sunday golfer, he goes out and plays. He doesn't go out and practice. And what we're getting now is a lot of practice, and practice does make perfect. And the system that is working extremely well, nothing's perfect, but it's working extremely well. And we're seeing the benefits of it in the joy of football.
Yeah. That makes me think of certain football clubs where there seems to be a problem with the hierarchy who want to build a profit rather than build support. But I won't go into that now.
Naming no clubs, but I'll give you a guess of one.
Let's move on to voice of passion, voice of reason.
Voice of passion.
I have so many issues with referees. I will need a podcast of 1 million series to go through them all. But today I want to concentrate on just one of them, and that is their making the game about themselves and their constant stopping of the game. Referees should never stop the game. Now, one of the issues about players getting injuries this season, I'm sure, is the amount of time they're standing around waiting for VAR to make a decision. 3-4 minutes in a game, you can be standing around when these games are replayed at this incredible tempo. It's just no way to treat an athletic body. But the thing I really want to concentrate on today is how they've changed the way they operate in the last 4 or 5 years, is that they stop the game in order to go and tell people to stop doing things when the play is dead. It's none of their business. It is absolutely none of their business. This game is not about you. You are not supposed to be in the spotlight. Stay out of it. If people are doing something which is in breach of the laws of the game, when the ball is played, you blow your whistle and you give a free kick. If it's a corner or a free kick that's going into the penalty area, you give a free kick to the defending team or you give a penalty. And that is all your job is. It is not your job to go up to the player or players and say, don't do this. Why'd you do that? It's got nothing to do with you. Stay out of it. Just let the game carry on. Now, because of the nature of the game and the worst organisation, last week we had a little bit of a go at FIFA and UEFA and various FAs. We didn't have a go at IFAB, which is the one that has made me bald. Nothing else has made me more bald than the birth of my 2 kids when my wife pulled my hair out, and IFAB with their stupid changes of rules. And Jurgen Klopp had a go at IFAB and said nothing's good come out of them for ages. Why do we book someone, stop the game and book someone if they kick the ball away? Move the free kick forward, move the throw-in forward 10 yards.
We tried that.
Yeah, but they booked that. That was when they didn't withdraw 10 yards. And what did they do then? They introduced a booking. So they stopped the game then. They made it about the referee. Just move it forward 10 yards. Move it forward 10 yards. You throw the ball the wrong direction, move the throw in 10 yards. You kick the ball away, move the free kick forward 10 yards. It'll stop tomorrow. Don't have bookings. Don't make it about referees. Just play the game. And we won't then get these 10-minute stoppage times that are going on now, which are just ludicrous. And stop, start. It does no one any good. Just stay out of it, refs. Blow your whistle when you need to. And for the rest, shut up.
I would just like to add to that, that they are trying to manage the matches. That's what you're talking about, the match relationship between the official and the players. But what has disappointed me, and I would be up for doing this, why are we not able to talk to IFAB? Why are they put away at their meetings and the law has changed? This is your work for next year. Mug up on this before the new season starts to all the commentators and the players and the managers and the fans. So I cannot understand why my colleagues in journalism haven't pushed harder to get inside IFAB, talk to the people involved. Why would they not want to talk and explain what's going on, the thought process in it? If they don't, I'm more suspicious than if they would. I mean, Howard Webb, I think, has opened up corridors that we've not been allowed to go down before. And he shouldn't be having to apologise at times for IFAB's decision. It's the law that the referees are having a struggle to interpret.
And his hands are tied by IFAB. He can't actually say, this is just a stupid law. He can't do that.
And also by FIFA saying we've got to play all these extra minutes as well. So there are a lot of pressures put on the referees that you're lambasting, that they have to live with. There's nothing to do with ability. That's the working practice. And I don't see why IFAB cannot come out and explain. David Ellery, a former Premier League referee, is at the centre of it.
Who gave the worst refereeing performance in an FA Cup final ever in 1994 when Manchester United were given a penalty, which was A, not a penalty, and B, outside the penalty area against Chelsea. And I've never, ever, ever forgiven him. And in fact, on the first league game the following season, 94-95, when I was pitch host at Chelsea, I brought some people out on the pitch at the beginning, and Ray Wilkins, who we just mentioned, was one of them. You know, we're sporting Chelsea this season. And the last one I announced before we full house to face Norwich, the last one I announced was our cup final referee, David Ellery, and the whole ground booed like you've never heard before. And I just bent down, looked down the tunnel, and he said, oh, it's all right. He can see everything he needs to see from down the other end of the tunnel, 35 yards away. I've never forgiven him, and I never will.
Well, you can understand how difficult it is for me to now carry on with what I was going to say before this rant from my colleague and friend. I worked on a committee with David Ellery for a number of years, a voluntary part of it. It was nice to be asked, and I learned a lot from him. I would like to, David, let's do an interview, which come on this podcast. Let's talk about these issues, because by not speaking, you're making us more suspicious of it, when maybe you're a very erudite person. Come and talk to us and explain the thinking about IFAB and what the process is.
I won't.
I'll keep him under control, and you know me well enough to know that it would be sensible. So that, I just throw it out there. Let IFAB be more with a sense of public relations, because we are dancing to your tune. The world game, which so many billions of people love, you're actually at the epicenter of it. So share some of that with us. The invitation is there.
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Right, let's move on and let's stay with this theme of injuries and everything. I want to go back to the beginning of the century and for my whole football life up till then, when there was a combination league, as we used to call it, a reserve league, a men's league for people who weren't in the first 11. And of course, there used to be first 11s. There weren't squads. The squads came in the 90s, obviously, with the Premier League and the Champions League. But there weren't squads in the same way even then. And it was only really when the overseas coaches came over that they got rid of the reserve league and they introduced just development leagues. And that's when all these masses of loans started happening for young players to finish their development, because it's the only way they could get experience of men's football. You never see, or very rarely see, it's happened at Liverpool this season, but with players who've been out on loan, basically, players coming out of the under-21s and going into first-team football at the highest level, at the Premier League level. And I understand how it's no longer the right thing to do in terms of, if you have a squad, Paul Clement told me this, of course, was the assistant to Carlo Ancelotti at Real Madrid and Paris Saint-Germain and Chelsea before that. He said you can't have a squad of 25 and then take half of them away to play a game on a Monday, and then they got to do a recovery on a Tuesday, and they won't actually feel as though they're part of the squad ever. It will divide the squad up. So you can't have that kind of men's league anymore. It just wouldn't work in the environment of a football team. But it seems to me now that it's almost impossible, if you get an injury during the season, to get match fit to play in the Premier League or La Liga or wherever, just through fitness coaches. You never, ever get that fitness back. And I think that players are coming in from injuries or from not playing for a long time because they just haven't been selected, and they're undermining their team more than people who came in 25 years ago used to do. And I'll just give you one example. This is back in the early 1990s, I remember. Chelsea were not great at the time. And we had a centre-back called David Lee, who you'll remember, who wasn't naturally fit. Let's put it that way. If you're watching or listening, Rodders, as his nickname was, you know that. And he got a hamstring injury and he missed 3 games, and Chelsea lost the 3. And Ian Porterfield was the manager and was desperate to get him back in the team in order to change the results. And Chelsea lost on a Saturday and were playing on the Wednesday. And he said to Dave Lee after the game, "You'll be fit for Wednesday, you're playing on Wednesday." And Dave Lee said, "I'm not playing without a reserve game." And so it was agreed. And on the Monday, when there was a reserve game, which was at Kingstonian, which is now Kings Meadow, but Kingstonian, where you managed.
Coached,
sorry. Yeah. He went and played a reserve game on the Monday for 1 hour, came off and said, "I'm fit for Wednesday."
Well, it's not going to happen. So there's no way that system can work. Half the whole squad goes with the games now. There's still people left out. You know, we can't take everybody. You've got a playing staff of 30, can't take them all. Well, you can, but only 9 on the bench and the starting 11. But it is inclusivity in a different sense, really. And also, you know, the grounds staff, they don't want other games being played, particularly proper, solid men's football. Otherwise, you'd find that non-league teams would go and have a game at Stamford Bridge. You know, people, it's a different time. And that reserve league was great. And anybody who played in it would have felt that they were a proper professional player. If you're playing a development team now, I don't think you can count yourself as that. And it's something the game has lost. But it's a balancing act, Neil. For all the things that are different, that's different for a reason. And usually it's a positive reason. But I, like you, more than the passing of the old football combination, because I used to go and watch some games and you'd get 4 or 5 internationals. When the foreign players, you talk about the foreign coaches, when the foreign players came over, they thought it was an insult to play in the reserves, which it wasn't. But it was hard to be explained. It hadn't happened to them in their native countries and they wouldn't want to participate. So it's I still want to hear from David Allery.
Yeah, but I think this issue of getting players fit, we got fitness coaches in the Premier League towards the second half of the 1990s is when the fitness coaches started coming in. And it was very evident how much fitter people got with fitness coaches, but they didn't get match fit. They got fit to play games and become match fit. And I think that problem still exists of how do you get a player fit again to play. There are some who are naturally fit, but most aren't.
But at the start of the season, it's the same, isn't it? Everybody's done pre-season, and then remember dear Bob Paisley saying, "Oh, we won't be fit until November. We'll be using all these matches to get really properly match fit."
But you have 5-6 games in order to get fit in pre-season, and you don't get that in the season because you can't play at a lower level because the under-21s doesn't give you that option.
No, it's a different kind of game. But anybody who's ever played football at a reasonable level will know that feeling at the end of the first game of the season. It's something you can't describe and you can't really prepare for because you're just taken into areas by the nature of the competition that you haven't been able to find, whatever way you've done your build-up. So, listen, it's one of the issues in the game. A bit more concerned about why the injuries are there in the first place.
Right, one final question on this before we move on to three of the best. You mentioned, obviously, the World Cup in the middle of the season and the hangover from that, but I still think there's a hangover from COVID and the extended 2019-2020 season and then no gap into the 2021 season. And it's all related to that. Is it possible that it could just plateau again and it is a result of all that? Or will certain clubs go off to the Club World Cup and play 32-game tournament and everybody will just get knackered beyond belief?
It's very fashionable now to say that the players should dig their heels in and refuse to play, or the unions, the PFA in England and FIFPro should be called upon industrial action, etc. That would be terrible. The players wouldn't want it. They want to play. I mean, the more games you play, the more you feel that you're having a career. Now, whether in the end, it was quite normal to play some 60 games with all the ancillary competitions for a 42-game league, and lower down it's still a 46-game league, and into non-league football it's the same. So you can't kill that competitive instinct. Most people, not everybody, we all know that we all pick our teams. We get to know the players, the ones who don't really like football, and we never make them public, but that really everybody wants to play. So why? It's up to the schedulers to say enough is enough, prompted by the players, but the players can't turn up and say one day, well, we ain't having this tournament, because whether it's their clubs or their countries, the financial involvement, players are very well rewarded. I know that doesn't cover everything, but in the end, there is another reason to fulfill your contract, not be in breach of your contract. So I just hope it can be sorted out by natural selection. But we are playing to it. It is frightening to think that something will have to give. And people will think, oh, it's the new things that are going to have to give, the Club World Cup, so the bigger Champions League. My fear is that it's the basics that'll have to give, and we'll start at a different base, and things that we absolutely take for granted, like a proper league season from beginning of August to the end of May, football that people go and watch, clubs that they go and watch all the time, and that is a priority, and that's the first target for honours, that might be chipped away at in the cause of making the elite stuff stick, because that's the stuff that makes money for the broadcasters and for the federations.
Right. End of all that. Let's get on to three of the best. Three of the best?
Are you asking me?
No, I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you.
Oh, no, that was thrust upon me by... there are certain things you say in computer games that you never, ever remember saying. And the one thing that my good friend Jeff Shreves, I suddenly realised that people like me to say cheers, Jeff. And I said cheers, Jeff, at work, 5 times a day or something. Oh, can I have a coffee? Yeah, cheers, Jeff. And that's on the computer game. And I was coaching at Hampton Richmond. We were coaching some kids in the morning before a first team game up on the back pitch. And these kids went, say cheers, Jeff. Not Aguero, not Drogba, or Shearer. Say cheers, Jeff. And I said, I'll do better than that. I'll get him on the phone. So we got him on speakerphone and we did a proper cheers, Jeff session. So what am I supposed to say? What am I supposed to say about three of the best?
He's made them pay.
He's made them pay.
Let's go. Right. This is where we look for a young player, an old player, and a player. Young player.
Well, I looked trying to avoid the obvious, really, but I'm fascinated by the career of Phil Foden. His origins, the way he's come through, just like footballers used to come when I started watching football, when everyone was a local hero in the team. Now they're obviously rarities. And the wonderful work he does for Manchester City, and it continues to amaze me. He's not yet 24. He scored 78 first-team goals. I was privileged to see both of his hat-tricks at the Manchester Derby last season. I was working for Sky, and this year working in the Premier League productions, his hat-trick at Brentford. Just a captivating talent. But then we've had the 2 England games since, and I think it's 33 caps and 4 goals. And 2 of those were against Iceland. One was in the World Cup against Wales, and one against Scotland more recently. And he's had a few near misses. I remember he hit a post during the Euro finals, and I said if that goes in, then Phil's off and running. And I would love to get into his head about what is the difference? Is there more of a pecking order at one club or country, or is there a different managerial instruction? I'm sure there is, and what you've got to do, what's right for the team. But Jude Bellingham, quite rightly, for what he's done at Real Madrid, is bestriding England. But there's a place for Phil Foden, which on any day could be build the whole team around him. But that doesn't happen very often. I did a Q&A with Glenn Hoddle, about whom there was a massive debate in the 1980s when he was an outstanding player. Well, if Glenn plays, we've got to build the whole team around him. Well, Phil Foden's not like that. But he does have the capacity, just watching as a seasoned observer, thinking, goodness me, you could take any game by the scruff of its neck, club or country. So he's still in his formative stage, despite all the honours. He got well into double figures with trophies. So it's been an extraordinary career already. But I just think there's somewhere else to go. And maybe we'll see him go there. And I'd love for it to happen, for him to go there in Germany and be the person that lights the progress, the blue touch paper, if you like, that takes England to a long-awaited trophy. He's that good. He can do it. And as Englishmen, we should want him to do it.
My youngster is 2 youngsters, 23 years old, Real Madrid, you mentioned, Vinicius and Rodrigo. The trend now amongst all these clubs is to buy young and buy the future. Well, Vinicius cost 40 million euros when he was 16, and they loaned him back to team in Brazil, and he came when he was 18. And Rodrigo cost 45 million euros, I think, a year later. Vinicius for me is currently the second best player in the world behind Mbappe. But Rodrigo has really flowered in the last 18 months, 2 years, and come to a level not far behind. And of course, they've been playing up front as a duo this season in front of a midfield diamond with Bellingham behind. But I saw Vinicius pull on a Real Madrid shirt in the game for the first time ever. His first game for Real Madrid. It was a pre-season match in Miami in 2018 against a very poor Manchester United side who were in the third game of their tour, and it was Real Madrid's first game, and Manchester United beat them by 2-1. And after about 20 minutes, Vinicius, who hadn't done anything, and you were sitting there thinking, 40 million euros, he did this dummy. And there were 64,000 people, full capacity in the Hard Rock Stadium in Miami. And I swear to God, 64,000 people went, whoa, as he did this dummy. I mean,
I bet you did.
I did. The whole stadium, it was unbelievable. And just, it lit everything up. I mean, it was an extraordinary game because United were all, Jose Mourinho was throwing his toys out the pram on that tour. Don't know why anybody pays to watch these pre-season games, and they were expensive. Not for me. I was in the press box, obviously. But if I tell you, the man of the match was actually Anders Herrera, who was fighting for his place at United at the time. And he gave me a wonderful interview afterwards. It was Vinicius has just become everything that Real Madrid must have wanted. And last season, when Chelsea played them in the Champions League, I went into the mix zone afterwards, and he came out and spoke, remember, not in his first language, in Spanish, because obviously his first language is Portuguese, to an absolute massive Spanish journalists. And he was relaxed, he was humorous, he was cracking jokes. I don't speak Spanish, but he had them all eating out of the palm of his hand. He was a mature, wonderful person. Meanwhile, in Spain, there is a level of racism in that country at games that is undermining him as a person, and he is fighting against it very openly. And I just think he's one of the most brilliant people in football at the moment and deserves massive, massive respect. And I have seen him. I've seen him in a restaurant as well in Montreal. I get about with Real Madrid, and he's just he's a charming young man, and he and Rodrigo are really two of the best watches in football at the moment for me.
Well, you've led me on to my old player very neatly, Neil, because I want to talk about Alex Williams, who had to undergo and would be a great person for Vinicius to talk to as prejudice against him when he was Manchester City's goalkeeper in the 1980s. He's in his 60s now, and he sent me, if you're watching this, I'll show you this and recommend it. He's written a book, which you saw me standing alone, which applies to the Man City song, and of course being a goalkeeper, and particularly a goalkeeper who was going to be picked on and was picked on. One of the great people in the game. Whenever there's a good cause, you find Alex there. And he's just stopped being a full-time employee of Manchester City and enjoys retirement. The book's well worth a read, I promise you that. But I wanted to talk about him for that reason, but also because he sort of cropped up in conversation at the pre-match in the press room before West Ham played Spurs recently, because he saved a penalty from the great West Ham penalty taker, Ray Stewart. And Ray, who lives in Scotland, who scored over 70 penalties, I think, in his time at West Ham, was actually there. So I said, I'm reading Alex Williams' book. And he says that I knew what was coming. And there was a deadly silence as Ray ran up to unleash another of his trademark rockets. He smashed it. He was called Tonka, indestructible. And he was a great penalty. The ball was destroyed often. I moved to my left as Ray smashed the ball almost down the middle of the goal. Instinctively, my right hand came up and I just managed to deflect the ball high into the air before it landed on top of the netting. I could scarcely believe I had stopped it, joining a select band of goalkeepers who had saved one of his penalties. Now, when I told Ray about this, he went, no, maybe it was going over anyway. It was a nice, obviously great respect between the two of them. But he did tell me, and it's just an interesting side issue really, that the ones that he missed were when he didn't tonk it, when he tried to place it. And the only time he could recall being a successful changing of his modus operandi was at the old Wembley in a League Cup final against Liverpool when the great Ray Clements was the Liverpool goalkeeper. And he thought, well, Ray will know all about how I hit it up, but he's been around so long, he might well guess where it's going to go. So he rolled it into the corner, and he said it's the only time, out of respect for Ray Clements, that he took it on like that. But Alex Williams, if you don't know of him, learn about him. And if you do know him, you know why I'm saying this. He's a great guy.
And Pat Nevin, in the 84-85 season, in a League Cup tie in which Chelsea beat Manchester City 4-1, took the worst penalty ever. I don't think he knows even now what was going through his head when he ran up to take it. But in the end, all he did was roll the ball to Alex Williams, who bent down and picked it up. And Pat will argue that wasn't going in either, because it wouldn't have reached the goal had he not picked it up.
There was probably some music going through Pat's head.
Yeah.
Some music that none of us had heard of.
Brilliant. One quickie on that. Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, who also smashed penalties like Ray Stewart did, told me that the way he would practice penalties was he'd get a goalkeeper after training, put him in the goal and tell him which side of the goal he was going to put his shot. And he would practice beating the goalkeeper, going the right way, and putting it right in the corner. And that's how he practiced penalties. And he was one of the best of the lot. My old player, I've got two old players, and I'm doing this because I think there is... there's a sense in football with all the money around of entitlement. But I just want to go to old players who didn't have that sense of entitlement. And I've picked on two. Bob Wilson, who won the double, of course, with Arsenal in 1971, goalkeeper, and who, when he finished goalkeeping, became one of the first goalkeeping coaches. He was a pioneer in that sense, and went into television and became a television presenter. I'm sure you worked with him at some stage.
I saw a lot of him,
Yeah.
and also had the opportunity when I was working as a print journalist to talk to him about that 70-71 season, and he could not have been more gracious, giving time and being able to go to his home and look at his own souvenirs. So absolutely top guy.
His daughter, he had three children. His daughter died shortly before her 32nd birthday, and he and his wife the following year set up a charity, the Willow Foundation, because there was nothing. She didn't die until I think 1998, so it was 4 years from the problem arising. They set up a foundation for people aged between 16 and 40, the Willow Foundation, to have good days out, for money to be raised in the way that it is there for kids, in the way that it is there for old people like us, but he did it, or they did it, for 16 to 40-year-olds, and it's something that goes on. He's 82 now, Bob Wilson, but it's just something that's made. I've seen it in practice when he's been doing some fundraising. It's something that's made an essential difference to people,
and is still doing so.
Yeah. So there are footballers out there who don't get enough publicity, not because they don't need the publicity, but who don't get it when the things go right, only get it when the things go wrong. And I want to pick up an old player from my club, John Dempsey. And John Dempsey was a Republic of Ireland international, won the FA Cup in 1970, the European Cup Winners' Cup, scored in the final in 1971. He played about 250 odd games for Chelsea. He was at Fulham before that. And when he retired after dabbling in management and what have you, he became a worker in a day centre in North London, in Barnet, for people suffering with learning difficulties. And I went up there and filmed there and everything. And I mean, this was just unbelievable. I mean, some of them were quite extreme, and he was changing incontinence underwear. He was taking them out in minibuses on weekends to playing table tennis tournaments and everything. He suddenly was devoting his whole life to it. He did it for 25 years, and he said to me, "Do you know what? I've got as much out of this as I ever got out of football." He said, "I'm just so delighted I went into it." And he was just a member of staff and everything. And he phoned me in the mid-1990s, and he said, can you get me in touch with Matthew Harding, director of Chelsea? We need a new minibus. And if we can get a donation, you know how these things work. You get your first money, and then you build up, and money comes in quicker. We're hoping to raise some enough money to get a new minibus. So I put them in touch, and I went up with Matthew. He wanted to have a look at the place where they were working, and he came out with John. He came out and he said, "Look, I'm not going to muck about. How much is the whole thing?" And I think it was about 35 grand, which is probably 350 grand now. And John said what it was, and he said, "Right, I'll pay the whole lot." That's how much influence it had on someone with money who
It's a remarkable story.
and you don't I don't think you have those relationships in football anymore, but what you have people who leave football and do go out there and have a new life, and who are giving to society, not feeling they're entitled, and there's just two of them. Lovely. Right, finally, three of the best, your player.
Yeah, this is one that I thought about. It's Neil puts this imposition on me on a regular basis, and try to come up with something that's perhaps not been covered in the mainstream press. And the player I'm going to go for is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg of Tottenham, who is an established Premier League player. He played, of course, for Southampton before he went to Spurs, and played regularly for Spurs. And I think it's true that before this season at Tottenham in the Premier League, he'd only made appearances as a starter. He might have been a substitute, but he'd never come on as a substitute. Now, he is only a substitute for Ange Postecoglou. And I think the game at West Ham recently came on for the last couple of minutes, and I'd seen him the Saturday before come on at home to Luton for the last couple of minutes. The game at the London Stadium was his 23rd substitute appearance out of 30 games. He's got on with it without any complaint. There were rumours that he was going to leave the club in the summer. There was a possibility he was going to go to Fulham, I think, but there were more Spanish clubs were more of an enticement to him, but it didn't happen. So he's found himself at Spurs. Now he's got on with the job. He comes on, there's no complaints. You don't read anything about him in the media saying, this is terrible, I should be a regular, and this, that, the other. This international break, he captained Denmark for the first time. He was probably the only player going away from the Premier League to international football, wanting to play every minute and not wanting to have a bit of a rest while he's away with his country. So he played all but 6 minutes, I think, of the first game. And when he was captain in the second game, he scored and also played the full 90 minutes plus. So well done to him. He's obviously a strong character. He's kept his thoughts to himself, and he goes on. And I think for Ange Postecoglou, from what I gather, the feeling whether you're in the team or whether you're not, you obviously want to be in the team. And Pierre would be feeling he should be in the team, but he's got on with it. And I think it's a real credit to his profession and to his club, and indeed to his country, that he's now been captain of. So more power to him. I'm sure he'll get a start soon.
And a great post-match interview, by the way. Yeah, and came. I mean, he was a young player at Bayern Munich, wasn't he?
He was. He started really, and like a lot of Scandinavians going into Bayern Munich and German football to get their first baby steps really along the road that's taking them at the moment to being sub at Spurs. But we know he's better than that. But he's doing a job for the club at an important time, and that's just caught my eye because not everyone can stand out and do the winning goal celebrations, and he will feel part of it. And I'm sure in that Tottenham dressing room, they know he's part of it as well.
My player this week is Declan Rice. And the reason I'm going for Declan Rice is, I'll tell you what, before I give you the reason, let's just hear this clip from a recent press conference between me and Maurizio Pochettino. It seems that the most important period of a player's career is between the ages of 21 and 24, where they either develop into a real Premier League player or maybe they just miss out. And so many players here are between the ages of 21 and 24. Is it possible that unless the mentality is right, a number of these players will miss out? They won't develop into top players.
What a question, eh? It's a good question, but with no answer. But it's a good reflection.
Yeah.
Yes, very interesting reflection.
Maurizio Pochettino not answering me in a press conference, or maybe answering me.
I didn't quite get that, Neil. Was that your particular press conference with Pochettino? Is it a one-to-one? I'm sure you deserve such an accolade.
It's become a weekly thing. Yeah. But the point being that he obviously feels that 21 to 24-year-olds aren't maybe going to develop at Chelsea in as many numbers as the ownership would like. seems to be a message to them, to me. But my point is, I do feel that 21 to 24 is the most important period in a footballer's development. And most stop developing around the age of 21, and the world-class ones keep going like that. If you look at Cristiano Ronaldo, in 2007, 2008, his first great season, he was 22 turning 23. And even Lionel Messi, I remember his first great season was 2008, 2009. And he was 21, I think, turning 22. So these are the years where that last real step up to world class happens. And if I look at Declan Rice, I cannot think of another player in the Premier League who has improved so much between the ages of 21 and 24 as he has. He was just a big midfielder, stopping things,
heading for a career in international football with the Republic of Ireland. No disrespect to that, but that was the way he was going, and clearly he is English, so he was entitled to make the turn. But to get that, to be persuaded to make that turn, I think he was told he was going to play some games, and that must have helped enormously as well.
But to get to a point where you captain your team to a European trophy at the age of 24, make a £105 million move to Arsenal, and then have the most magnificent season as he is having. And I think people in England now are beginning to talk about him in the same breath as they took him out Rodri. And that is quite some...
They're quite good mates, actually. They met on holiday. I'm not breaking exclusive here, but I saw an interview with Declan at the weekend, and clearly they face-to-face in that big game, but also huge respect. And I think that goes both ways as well. 50 caps, captain of England on his 50th cap. And
now moving on to a more offensive role. I mean, this is the guy who Chelsea rejected aged 14 as a centre-back. And he it's just that 21 to 24 period where maybe some of his contemporaries didn't improve in the same way. I think he's becoming world class.
I can tell you all that, and Neil doesn't know this, but between the age of 71 and 74, there's a massive improvement in journalism. I've lived through that period, so I can tell you that. So you've got a lot to look forward to.
It's coming up. Okay, that is the second episode of The Joy of Football. We're still loving it, every moment of it, because it is the greatest addiction in the world.
I'm not going to disagree with you this time.
Right, from Martin and me.
Cheers.
Ta-ra. And just to tell you at the finish, we apologise. We gave you the wrong email address on the first podcast. That's how good we are with technology. If you want to email us, the address is the Joys, plural, the Joys of Football Podcast. We missed that word out. The Joys of Football Podcast at gmail.com. Do contact us with your ideas, contributions, and hey, abuse if that's what you want. I'm on social media. Do you know, I've never blocked anyone on social media because I wouldn't give them that amount of recognition. I just throw them away. But we're also on Instagram and on TikTok at the same address. And that is, I've got to check, joy_of_football_podcast. Can I just check, gentlemen, there's no "the" at the beginning of that?
No, it's not podcast, it's just pod.
Oh, right. Joy_of_football_pod. It wouldn't be right if I got the last bit right, would it?
Aguero!
The Joy of Football.